It happened on Christmas Day 2 years ago. Every December since, the events replay in my mind, like a nightmare that never fully fades. That year, I was 17, living with my parents in a quiet suburban neighborhood in Washington state. The holiday seemed straight out of a Christmas card. Snow lightly falling, the sky a crisp blue in the morning, and the soft pink hue of the evening sun. Inside, however, chaos reigned. My family goes all out for Christmas. I'm talking about cousins, aunts, uncles, grandparents. Everyone squeezed into our house, loud and bustling. Kids running around, frosting on their faces, my uncle and grandma arguing over the turkey's seasoning, and Christmas movies playing too quietly in the background. As the quiet one in the family, I usually stuck to the edges, helping with food, pretending to laugh at small talk, and retreating to the kitchen when things got too much. That's when I first saw him. My cousin Rachel walked in with a man I didn't recognize. He was in his mid-30s, much older than her, and his presence seemed to have an unsettling effect. His dark eyes locked onto me the moment he entered. He wore a Christmas sweater, which on anyone else would have seemed festive. But on him, it felt off, like a costume. I was at the counter, slicing some store-bought apple pie when his gaze hit me. It wasn't a casual glance. It felt like a scrutinizing stare, something cold and calculating. I quickly turned my focus back to my plate, feeling uncomfortable. "This is Derek," Rachel introduced him, dragging him over to my mom. "We've been dating for a few months." "Nice to meet you," my mom said, with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Everyone else laughed, but Derek's chuckle sounded forced. I stayed quiet, looking down. But every time I glanced up, his eyes were on me. As the night wore on and everyone moved to the living room for gift exchanges, I found a spot on the floor by the far wall, partly hidden behind the tree, scrolling through my phone. I put in my headphones but didn't play any music. I just needed the escape. Derek, however, kept circling the room. He wasn't mingling. He was watching me. He'd stand just close enough that I could feel his presence, then lean down to start a conversation, pretending to be interested in whatever was near me. "You're Rachel's cousin, right?" he asked at one point, kneeling next to me like we were old friends. I could smell his cologne. Strong, synthetic, and something underneath it, a faint sourness. "Yeah," I replied, barely acknowledging him. "You look different from the rest of them," he said, eyes lingering over my clothes, my hair. "I like your style." It was a compliment, but there was something off about it. I could tell he was just sizing me up, and I felt the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. I didn't answer. Instead, I moved to sit with my younger cousins, hoping to avoid him. But Derek followed, always reappearing just when I thought I'd escaped him. He asked strange questions about my boyfriend, what music I liked, and whether I ever snuck out at night. It wasn't normal, not when it came from a guy pushing 40. The last straw came when I was alone in the hallway, picking at some leftover tape from gift wrapping. Derek stepped into my path, blocking me, and gave me that unsettling smile. "You know, you're going to be trouble when you're older," he said, his eyes locked on mine. "If you're not already." I felt my stomach twist. Everything in me screamed that this was wrong. "If you don't back off," I said, my voice shaking but steady, "I'd tell my parents you're creeping on me." His smile faltered for a second, but then it returned, colder this time. "Relax," he said, backing off. "I was just joking around. Don't be so serious." I didn't know if I should tell my parents, but the night continued. Rachel looked happy with Derek. Everyone was laughing, and the kids were showing off their new toys. I convinced myself I was overreacting, so I let it go, brushing it off as the evening wore on. By 9:00, the house was quieter. People began leaving, hugs and well wishes all around. I watched from the stairs as Rachel and Derek left. He met my eyes and gave a little wave. I pretended not to see. At 10:30, the house was silent. I went upstairs to my room, thankful the night was over. The snow was still falling, and the view from my window felt like something from a film. I put on my headphones and flopped onto my bed, trying to unwind. But then I heard it, a small tap on the glass behind my head. I froze, heart pounding. I told myself it was just a branch from the snow-laden trees outside. But then, 5 minutes later, the tap came again, louder. I turned and looked at the window. It was fogged from the warmth inside, and I wiped a circle clear with my sleeve. Through the condensation, I saw a figure standing down the street. His posture was slightly hunched, like he had been standing there for a while. His head tilted slightly upward, his eyes locked on mine. It was Derek. I stumbled backward, my heart racing. My body felt frozen in place as I quickly shut the blinds and turned off the light. My mind screamed at me to do something, anything. But I stayed there, peeking through the blinds every few minutes, hoping it was a mistake. For half an hour, I saw nothing, but then the figure was back. Derek Dorr. He was still standing there, just beyond the street lamp's glow, his head tilted upward, staring at my window. I couldn't take it anymore. My heart was pounding in my chest as I ran downstairs, yelling for my dad. Somebody's at my window. My dad, half asleep, didn't waste any time. He grabbed his gun from the safe and a flashlight and headed out the back door. My mom called 911, her hands shaking. I stayed at the top of the stairs, watching through the window. In the yard, the beam of my dad's flashlight cut through the darkness, landing on Derek, just standing there in the snow. No gloves, no hat. His breath fogged the air. "What the hell are you doing here?" my dad shouted. I need to talk to her," Derek said, his voice surprisingly calm. "Talk to my daughter at midnight," my dad growled. Derek laughed, but it was that same empty, rehearsed laugh from earlier. "She's special. I love her. I want to marry her. You can sign for her, right? Parental consent. That's all it takes." My mom gasped, covering her mouth. My dad exploded in anger, charging at Derek. He tackled him into the snow, pinning him down with his knee. "I'll call the cops," my mom whispered, but she already had her phone out, dialing. When the police arrived, they pulled Derek off the ground, cuffing him and checking his pockets. My heart finally started to slow as I watched from the window. The cops found several bags of meth, fake IDs, and even some disturbing items, stuff I didn't want to think about. They loaded him into the squad car, and the officers gave me a silent nod, a look that told me I had done the right thing. Derek was arrested that night and taken away. My cousin Rachel broke up with him immediately and severed all ties. He was a stranger to all of us, and the only thing that kept me from the same fate as countless other girls was trusting my gut. That Christmas could have ended very differently, but I'm still here, thankful that I didn't second-guess myself when it mattered most. I was 17 when I lived through the worst night of my life. My name is Maya, and I grew up in Savannah, Georgia, a place where the air always smells like salt and rain, and the houses are too old to keep secrets. That summer, I was babysitting for the Vaughns, a new family who had just moved into the neighborhood. Their house sat at the edge of the marsh, half sunken into moss and fog, the kind of place where even the crickets sounded muffled. Their daughter, Leela, was 6, small, quiet, and pale, with long black hair and the habit of staring too long at things that weren't there. Her parents were polite, formal people. Mr. Vaughn taught literature at the local college, and Mrs. Vaughn worked in real estate. They were always exhausted, but kind. They paid well and never came home late. That night, they were attending a work dinner across town and said I'd be back by midnight. I arrived at 6:00 sharp. Mrs. Vaughn gave me the usual rundown. Dinner's ready on the counter. Lila can watch one movie. Bed by 8:30. She mentioned the baby monitor and told me, almost offhandedly, "Don't go into the upstairs room. It's being renovated." She smiled after saying it, but something in that smile felt rehearsed. Everything started out normal. Leela ate her spaghetti in silence, humming softly under her breath between bites.
Leela, are you
When I
okay?
asked what she was singing, she said,
Please answer me.
"It's the song the lady upstairs taught me." I laughed. "You mean your
Come on,
mom?"
Leela. Why won't you play?
She shook her head. "No,
Look at the
the other
shadows.
one.
Don't let it know you can.
I thought it was just kid stuff." We watched a cartoon after dinner, and by 8:15, I was tucking her into bed. Her room had old wooden floors that creaked no matter how softly you walked. Above her bed, a pink nightlight shaped like a rabbit cast an eerie glow on the ceiling. She clutched her doll, a cloth thing with button eyes and tangled yarn hair, and whispered, "Good night, Miss Maya. Don't listen if she calls you." I asked, "Who?" "The lady upstairs," she said, and rolled over. By 9:00, the house was dead quiet. I was curled up on the couch, scrolling through my phone when I heard it. A faint, sharp tap, then another. It came from upstairs. I muted my phone and listened. A third tap, slower this time, followed by the groan of an old floorboard. At first, I thought it was the wind or an animal. The Vaughn's place was surrounded by trees, after all. But the sound wasn't random. It was rhythmic. Deliberate. I grabbed the flashlight from my bag and started up the stairs, my pulse pounding. The light flickered as I reached the second floor. The renovation room was at the end of the hall. The door was half open. I could see just enough through the crack to notice a long piece of red thread trailing out of the room, stretched tight, like it had been pulled across the floor and into the dark. Every nerve in my body screamed to turn around, but I stepped forward anyway. When I nudged the door open with my foot, the smell hit me first. Sweet and foul, like rotting flowers. The flashlight beam swept across the floor. There were dolls everywhere. Dozens of them. Some plastic, some handmade, some missing eyes or limbs. All propped up against the wall like an audience. In the center of the room sat a half-finished doll the size of a child, its skin made of stitched-together fabric scraps, and something else. Something that didn't look like fabric at all. Its face wasn't sewn on yet, just a blank oval of flesh-colored material with holes where eyes should have been. The red thread I'd seen outside was still attached to it, looped through a needle sticking from its shoulder. My flashlight flickered again, and then the baby monitor in my pocket hissed to life. Through static, a voice whispered, "Come upstairs, Maya." I froze. I hadn't turned the monitor on. Then, faintly, the sound of humming. A lullaby. The same tune Lila had been singing earlier. My heart stopped. I ran back to Lila's room. The monitor still crackled in my hand. I burst through the door, and she wasn't in bed. The sheets were rumpled, the doll was on the floor, and the window was wide open, the curtains blowing inward. "Lila!" I hissed. Nothing. Then from the hallway, footsteps, slow, dragging, coming closer. I locked the door, shoved a chair under the handle, and called 911. My hands were shaking so violently I dropped the phone twice. The operator told me to stay quiet and not hang up. Outside the door, the footsteps stopped. Then, scratch, scratch, something ran along the wood. Like fingernails. The knob twisted slowly, once, twice, then stopped. "Lila," I whispered. Something giggled, but it wasn't Lila's voice. The laughter was higher, raspier, almost wet. Then the whisper came again, from the other side of the door. "She likes you, Maya. She says you can stay too." The chair jerked forward. I screamed and clutched the phone to my ear. The dispatcher's voice was tinny and distant. "Officers are 3 minutes away. Stay calm." The door shook again, harder. A thud, then silence. Then I heard it, the creak of the attic hatch opening above me. I looked up just as dust rained down from the ceiling. A square of blackness yawned open, and something pale and thin began to descend. I backed into the corner, clutching the phone. The light from the rabbit nightlight flickered wildly, strobing the room. And then I saw her. A woman, if you could still call her that, crawled down from the attic. Her limbs were too long, her face a patchwork of mismatched skin, stitches like red veins across her cheeks. Her mouth was a jagged seam pulled into a grin. In one hand, she held a needle longer than my arm. "Lila," she crooned, "come finish your sister." My scream must have rattled the windows. The next thing I remember is the front door crashing open and flashlights flooding the hallway. The creature, or whatever it was gone. They found me curled in the corner clutching Lila's doll. The police searched the house. Lila was found outside, barefoot in the marsh, shivering and covered in mud. She kept whispering. She didn't like my stitches. In the upstairs room, the officers found the half-finished doll, but it wasn't there anymore when forensics came back the next morning. Only a pile of red thread and a blood-stained needle remained. The Vaughns moved away 2 weeks later. No one ever bought that house again. I never babysat again either. But sometimes, late at night, I still hear that lullaby in my head. And every so often when I check my reflection in the mirror, I swear there's a faint red line running along my jaw, like someone started stitching. I was 6 the year Christmas changed forever. The year it stopped feeling like magic and started feeling like something sharp, cold, and dangerous. We had only been living in our new house for a few months. A weathered 2-story on the edge of Pine Ridge, a sleepy little town in northern Michigan. The kind of place where everyone knew your name, where kids played outside until dusk, and where people didn't bother locking their doors. My parents, Clara and Lucas, had bought the house because they said it had character. At 6, I didn't understand what that meant, but I did know it was the first time we'd ever had a home with enough space. My room was big enough for my old TV, all my Legos, and the massive collection of action figures I dragged everywhere. My older sister, Amelia, was 9 and had that typical bossy older kid energy that made her feel like she was at least 30. She and I were both obsessed with Christmas in the way only kids can be, counting down the days on a paper chain that we hung in the hallway, tearing off one link each morning like we were getting closer to treasure. But there was something about the house that made me uneasy. Not haunted, nothing supernatural, just too quiet at night. Pine Ridge was the kind of town where dads shoveled snow at dawn while moms warmed the car in their bathrobes. It wasn't the kind of place where bad things happened. At least, that's what we thought. That year, I was too excited to sleep again, like every other Christmas Eve. My mom always said if you don't sleep, Santa won't come. But I had a plan. I was determined to stay awake. I was playing Crash Bandicoot on my old box TV, bundled up in my favorite blanket that smelled like fresh laundry, the warm glow from the screen enough to keep the darkness at bay. At some point, my bladder won, and I had to pause the game. I turned the volume down to a whisper and slowly crept out of my room. The hallway was icy, the air biting against my skin. It was a brutal winter. Everyone in Pine Ridge said it was the coldest winter they'd seen in years. I padded down the stairs toward the bathroom, the house still, quiet and peaceful. At least, it felt that way. I had no idea that by the time I returned, everything would change. After using the bathroom, I cracked open the door again. And that's when I heard it. A soft, rhythmic rustling sound, like someone gently shaking a Christmas tree. My first thought was that it was Santa. I wasn't stupid, though. I knew how Santa was supposed to look, but Christmas had a way of making even logical kids believe in magic. The rustling came again. This time, curiosity got the best of me. I tiptoed halfway down the stairs, gripping the wooden railing. The pine scent from the living room hit me harder than usual. Then I saw it. A tiny glow, not the warm, flickering lights of Christmas. This was the sharp beam of a flashlight. My heart slammed in my chest as I leaned forward just enough to catch a glimpse. There, behind the Christmas tree, stood a man. Not Santa. Not anyone I knew. A grown man, pale and scruffy, wearing a thick brown jacket and jeans. His beard was patchy and he wore thin gloves, the kind you buy for a couple of bucks at a gas station. He saw me instantly. Our eyes locked. Then he put his finger to his lips, a low, breathy whisper. Shh. Even now, decades later, I can still hear it in my head. That voice, calm, almost amused, like he was enjoying the fear he saw in my eyes. I froze, my blood turning to ice. I wasn't stupid. I knew exactly what Santa was supposed to look like. This man didn't belong here. My throat tightened and then instinct took over. Mom! Dad! I screamed so loudly it hurt my ears. The man's eyes widened in panic. He grabbed the bag he had by the tree, but when he heard my voice, he hesitated. Then, without thinking, he dropped it. It spilled open, the contents scattering across the floor. Ornaments, wrapped presents, a porcelain angel my grandmother had given us. "Damn it!" he hissed and sprinted toward the front door. I watched everything unfold in slow motion. He yanked the door open, the cold winter air rushing inside as he bolted into the night. I stumbled back, shaking, my legs turning to jelly. My mom was the first one downstairs. Her hair was wild from sleep. "Sweetheart, what happened?" she asked, her voice frantic. I pointed at the door, sobbing so hard I could barely speak. There was a man in our house. My dad dashed past us, barefoot, his voice booming. Where the hell is he?" He rushed outside into the snow, and my mom screamed after him, but he didn't stop. The police arrived soon after. 2 officers in bulky winter coats stepped inside, their breath visible in the frigid air. Officer Sanders knelt in front of me, speaking gently. "You did the right thing calling out for your parents. You're safe now, all right?" But I didn't feel safe. Not with the back door splintered. Not with the ornaments scattered across the floor. Not with the cold creeping in from the crack the man had left open. My dad came back inside, sweat running down his face despite the cold. "I almost caught him," he muttered, pacing. "I swear, I was right behind him." My mom wrapped a blanket around me. "Did he say anything to you?" she asked softly. I nodded, tears still streaming. He said he was Santa. Amelia was hiding behind the couch, pale as a ghost. My mom turned to Officer Sanders, her voice shaking. "We found footprints outside the window," she said. "They're not fresh, but they were there. And the neighbor's security light was triggered about an hour before I woke up." Officer Sanders' jaw tightened. "We had 2 break-ins tonight, just a few blocks from here," he said grimly. "Same method. Back door forced open with a tool. Looks like he wasn't just after presents. He was stealing memories." The idea of someone taking our ornaments made my stomach churn. Those weren't just decorations. They were pieces of our history, memories from the past, things that couldn't be replaced. In the days that followed, the fear slowly blurred into confusion and disbelief. Years later, when I was older, I asked my mom about that night again. She sighed, her hands folded on the kitchen table. "You don't remember the worst part?" she asked softly. "What do you mean?" I asked. "That man didn't run immediately when he saw you," she said. He hesitated, like he was deciding whether to shut you up. "Kitty!" My stomach dropped. Then my dad added quietly from across the room, his voice strained. "When I chased him outside, he was hiding behind the neighbor's shed. If I'd been 5 seconds slower, I don't know what he would have done. They never told me that when I was 6. They didn't tell me how close I came to danger, or that the police later found more footprints circling our house, or that our neighbor's security system had been triggered an hour before I woke up, or that the man had tried to break into another house that same night. They told me one thing: he was never caught. I'm an adult now, with a son of my own. I lock every window, every door. I check them twice, sometimes 3 times before bed. My wife teases me for being paranoid, but she doesn't know what it's like to wake up on Christmas Eve and find a stranger in your home. She doesn't know the feeling of a grown man staring at you from behind a tree, lit with lights and ornaments, whispering to keep you quiet. She didn't see the way his eyes changed when he realized I wasn't fooled. And every Christmas, when I decorate our tree, I see the empty spots, ornaments replaced with new ones without meaning. I see that black duffel bag hitting the floor. I see him turning toward me, and I hear his voice. Shh. Santa's working. That's the part that never leaves. A deserted country road winds through dense fog. Tall trees. Inside is cold, stale, and smells faintly of decay. They walk in, their footsteps echo in the empty halls. Dust swirls around them in the moonlight. A grand staircase leads up to the second floor, its banister warped and rotting. Suddenly, a faint child's laugh echoes from upstairs. Emily freezes. Did you hear that? Emily Ging. Probably a raccoon or something. They continue, exploring. In the dining room, a long table is covered in cobwebs. Chairs are overturned. Temperature in the room drops dramatically. Their breath becomes visible. Suddenly, the lights from their flashlights flicker. Shadows stretch unnaturally along the walls. A cold, unseen hand brushes Emily's shoulder. She screams. Jason grabs a nearby chair, swinging it wildly, but hits nothing. The room is empty, yet the presence is undeniable. A low, guttural whisper fills the floor, clutching each other. The cold in the room is unbearable. Their breaths come in short gasps. Shadows twist unnaturally across the walls. Jason grabs his phone, trying to call her face in Jason's chest. The room grows darker, as if a shadow is spreading. A low, almost human-like moan echoes from the corridor. I want to leave. I want to go home, Emily cries. The hallway. The floorboards groan under his weight. Cold wind brushes past him. He shines the candle down the hall. A small pale hand suddenly reaches out from under the staircase, grabbing at him. Jason stumbles back, screaming. Jason! Emily screaming. The hand disappears as quickly as it appeared. Silence falls. But now, faint whispers are all around them, echoing from the walls and ceiling. Sudden slamming sound upstairs causes Liam to drop his camera. Dr. Vale moves toward the staircase. He ascends, candle in hand. The shadows seem to stretch along the walls, forming twists. Power of the unseen, I call you to listen. The ghost pauses, tilts her head. A whisper run toward the sound. They see furniture thrown across the room. A shadow moves across the ceiling, then lands in front of them. It's Madeline Thorne. Emily screaming. The ghost lunges at Jason. He is thrown across the room. Silver cross and chanting an incantation. The ghost lets out a chilling scream. Leave or die. I never believed in parental instinct. I believed in reason, in process, in the idea that if I did things right, everything would be all right. Perhaps that's why I ignored all the early signs. Things too small, too illogical to pay attention to. Until my son started bleeding from his ear, and I insisted it wasn't his turn yet. My son's name was Aaron, 8 years old. He was thin, quiet, and had a disturbingly strange memory. He remembered the exact dates and times of things no one bothered to record. The last time the neighbors changed the hallway light bulb, the number of steps from our front door to the garbage dump, or the location of every crack in the ceiling. I used to be proud of that. I thought I was raising a smart, just a little eccentric child. I didn't know that his memory wasn't a habit, but a requirement. It all started about 3 weeks before Aaron disappeared. The boy woke up in the middle of the night and said there was someone in the room. No screaming, no crying, just sitting up straight in bed and looking toward the dark corner near the wardrobe. I turned on the light, searched everywhere, and found nothing but dust and the familiar musty smell of the old apartment. I told him it was just a dream. Aaron looked at me for a long time, longer than usual, then nodded as if he knew I would answer that way. Before lying down, he asked me a question that annoyed me for some reason. If a person stands still long enough in the dark, are they still considered a person? I yelled at him to go to sleep. In the nights that followed, Aaron began to remember the things he saw in the room. He said that each night, the person stood a little closer. At first, against the wall. Then next to the desk. Then at the foot of the bed. What chilled me wasn't the story itself, but the fact that he could describe the exact location even with his eyes closed, as if he didn't need to look to know. When I asked why he didn't scream or run to my room, Aaron calmly replied that if he did, the other person would understand they'd been discovered, and then things would happen faster. I began to notice that Aaron wasn't sleeping soundly anymore. His eyes were dark and sunken, his reflexes were slow, and he often startled when someone stood too close. Occasionally, I saw him tilt his head as if listening to something I couldn't hear. Once, when I touched his shoulder from behind, Aaron cried out in pain and collapsed, as if I had squeezed an open wound. There were deep, evenly spaced, circular bruises on his shoulder, resembling fingertip marks, but much larger. The doctor said it might be from a fall. Aaron immediately shook his head and said the other person tried to pick him up, but wasn't used to it. On the 13th night, I was awakened by whispering in the apartment. It wasn't my son's voice, nor did it sound like any other voice I'd ever heard. It was low, wet, and had a strange rhythm, like someone practicing reading. When I jumped up and opened Aaron's bedroom door, I found him sitting on the floor, his back against the bed, his eyes wide open, staring at me. Blood trickled from his ear, thin but relentless, soaking his pajama collar. Aaron gestured for me to be quiet. I heard breathing right behind me, very close, close enough for me to feel the cold on the back of my neck. Aaron's lips moved, no sound came out, but I read it. Don't turn around. The next morning, Aaron didn't go to school. He said the other person didn't like the sunlight, but that didn't mean it didn't exist during the day. He started drawing. Hundreds of scribbled pencil drawings, all the same shape. A tall, thin body, joints bent out of place, and a head bowed so low that the neck was almost non-existent. In all the drawings, that thing was missing a face. Just a dark, blank space, as if trying to add more detail would tear the paper. When I asked why he didn't draw a face, Aaron replied that if he did, the other person would be complete. The night Aaron disappeared, I heard no screams. Nothing was broken. There were no signs of a struggle. I only woke up because the apartment felt too quiet, the kind of quiet that makes your ears ring from the lack of sound. Aaron's bedroom door was wide open. The bed was empty. On the floor were deep, round indentations, arranged in a row, leading from the bed to the front door, as if something had pressed its fingertips down on the floor to drag itself away. On the living room wall, I saw long, thin streaks of blood, not splattered, but swept upwards, forming chaotic curves, like the handwriting of someone unfamiliar with using their hands. The police found nothing. They said there were no signs of forced entry. They asked me about my son's psychological history. They didn't take notes when I described the person in the shadows. They used the word missing in a very light tone, as if it were a concept that could be folded up and put away in a file. 3 days later, I heard footsteps in the apartment at 3 in the morning. It wasn't Aaron's. The footsteps were too slow, each step accompanied by the sound of bones scraping against each other. I didn't dare open my eyes. I felt something stand by my bed for a long time, long enough for me to smell metal and something like stale meat. Then I heard Aaron's voice, very softly, very close to my ear, saying he was sorry for letting me see, but he couldn't take it anymore. When I opened my eyes, no one was there, but new, round indentations appeared on my arm, deepening day by day, as if something was learning to hold me captive. I realized too late that Aaron was never the final target. He was just the chosen one to open the door. And now, as I write these words, I hear that familiar breathing in the room. He doesn't need to hide anymore. He stood in the shadows long enough. And now it's my turn to learn to remember his location if I want to live another night. My name is Ethan, and this happened to me when I was living alone in a small apartment in the city. It was a night I'll never forget. I had just moved into the building, a modest place with peeling paint and creaky floors. Everything seemed normal until the first night I noticed the apartment directly across from mine. At first, it was nothing unusual. Windows, doors, typical city apartment life. But then I began noticing strange lights flickering at odd hours. Sometimes, the apartment would be completely dark, and suddenly a single window would glow with a dim, pale light. One night, around 2 a.m., I couldn't sleep. I went to my balcony for a cigarette. The street was quiet, and only the apartment across the street had the light on. I leaned on the railing, smoking, and noticed a man and a woman inside, standing very still, almost like statues. Their heads were close together, and I could faintly hear what sounded like whispering or muttering. I strained my ears, but it was hard to understand. Minutes passed, and their movements became strange. The man's gestures were stiff, unnatural, and the woman seemed frozen in place. My stomach twisted with unease. Something about them felt wrong. I blinked, and suddenly, the man's face caught the light in a way that made my heart stop. I could swear it was exactly like my own face. Every detail. Same eyes, same jawline. My hands shook. I told myself it must be a trick of the light, a reflection, or maybe just my imagination. But the feeling in my chest tightened. Fear, disbelief, and something darker I couldn't name. The woman suddenly moved closer to him, and I noticed she wasn't moving naturally. her head tilted unnaturally, her arms stiff. My mind screamed that this wasn't real, and yet I could see every detail. I stumbled back from the balcony, my heart racing. I tried to call a friend, anyone, but my phone screen flickered strangely and then went black. For weeks after that night, I began noticing more things. Sounds from the empty apartment. Shadows moving behind the curtains, always when no one should be there. Sometimes, I would catch glimpses of the man across the street standing perfectly still, staring directly at me. But when I looked again, the apartment seemed empty. One night, I dreamt that I walked into the apartment across the street. The man approached me. I felt his eyes on me, and my own reflection stared back, but it wasn't me. My reflection smiled, a cruel, knowing smile that froze my blood. I woke up sweating, heart pounding, and for days I couldn't shake the feeling that someone or something was watching me. I decided to investigate. I spoke to neighbors, asking casually about the apartment. Everyone shrugged. "No one's living there," they said. "It's been empty for months." Empty? Then, who had I been watching that first night? I told myself it had to be a hallucination, stress, lack of sleep. I tried to ignore it, but the flickering lights, the shadows, the figure with my face, it didn't stop. One evening, I returned home late. The building was unusually silent. I stepped into the lobby and noticed a small envelope slid under my door. Inside was a single piece of paper. Written in neat, unfamiliar handwriting, it said, "You are not alone. I have always been here, waiting." I dropped the paper, my hands trembling, my mind erased. Could it be a prank? A neighbor with too much time? But the handwriting, it looked eerily like my own. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat by the window, eyes fixed on the apartment across the street. And then, I saw it. The man, my face, standing at the window, watching, waiting. I didn't dare blink. My mind was screaming, heart pounding, stomach twisting. And then, the man raised a hand, pointing directly at me. Suddenly, my own hand rose on its own. I had no control. My body obeyed some unseen force. The man's lips moved, and I felt like I could hear him in my mind. "You belong to me." I collapsed onto the floor, shaking, unable to move. When I looked up, the apartment was empty. The lights were off. Nothing there but shadows. I tried to leave the building, move out, anything. But no matter where I went, I felt watched. Mirrors became my enemy. Reflections sometimes didn't match reality. My face in the glass sometimes smiled when I wasn't smiling. Weeks turned into months. Friends noticed I was pale, anxious, restless. I didn't tell them about the man across the street, the figure that was somehow me. Then one night, I received another envelope. Same handwriting. This one read, "Time is shorter than you think. Soon we will be one." I realized then that it wasn't just a hallucination. It was a warning, a doppelganger, something that was waiting for me, or waiting to replace me. I've moved apartments several times since then. Each time, I check across the street. Each time, I see the flickering light. Each time, I see him. My reflection. My double. Watching. Waiting. Sometimes, I catch myself staring into mirrors for hours, wondering if I'm really me, or if the man across the street has already started living my life somewhere else. I don't know if this will ever end. Maybe it's a curse, a psychological trap, or some strange cosmic joke. But I know this. The apartment across the street will always be watching, and so will he. And sometimes, late at night, when everything is quiet, I hear a whisper, faint but clear. "You're mine.